I never told my son Brady about my $48,000 monthly salary. I chose to live simply instead. When he nervously invited me to meet his fiance's wealthy parents, I decided to see what kind of people they really were by showing up as a struggling retiree. But the moment his future mother-in-law said, "These leftovers are perfect for you. Peter, take them home," I knew exactly who they were. And when their credit cards got declined, they never imagined that the poor old man they had just humiliated was actually the one holding all the power. Listen closely. Let me tell you who I am. Before I reveal who I really am, let me know, what city are you listening from? And have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who judged you too quickly? My alarm buzzed at 5:30 just like it had every morning for the past 20 years. I rolled out of my narrow bed feet, hitting the cold hardwood floor of my modest Denver apartment. No fancy marble tiles here, just honest wood that creaked with age and character. I shuffled to my small kitchen past furniture that most people would donate to Goodwill. My coffee maker was older than my son's pilot career, but it still brewed a decent cup. As steam rose from my chipped mug, I glanced at the stack of mail on my counter. Bills mostly. Nothing that screamed executive lifestyle. What those bills didn't show was the direct deposit that hit my account every month, $48,000. Enough to buy a mansion in Cherry Hills Village, drive a Tesla, wear designer suits. Instead, I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and shopped at Target. My neighbors probably thought I was just another retiree scraping by. The truth was more complicated. As regional director of Rocky Mountain Renewable Energy, I oversaw wind farms from Colorado to California, managed budgets that could fund small cities. But when I came home to this apartment, I was just another guy in faded jeans. My phone rang as I was buttering toast. Brady's name flashed on the screen. "Morning, Dad." My son's voice carried warmth, but something else too. Nervousness. "Hey, kiddo, you're up early for a pilot." "Actually, that's why I'm calling." He paused. "Sailor's parents are visiting this weekend. They want to meet you." I set down my coffee. "That's nice. I'd like to meet them too." "They're successful business owners. Restaurant group, 8 locations." Another pause. "Dad just, dress nicely, okay?" There it was. My 32-year-old son, accomplished airline pilot, worried that his old man might embarrass him. Brady had no idea that my monthly salary could buy one of those restaurants outright. "Sure, son. I'll dust off my good shirt." "Thanks, Dad. We're meeting them Saturday evening at the Broadmoor." The Broadmoor. I knew it well. I'd hosted corporate dinners there, signed million-dollar deals in their conference rooms. But Brady didn't know that. To him, I was just a simple maintenance worker who'd somehow scraped together enough for retirement. After we hung up, I stood in my living room, looking at the worn furniture, the basic television, the bare walls. I'd built this life, deliberately raised Brady to understand that worth came from character, not bank accounts. My own father had been a janitor, my mother a seamstress. They'd taught me that money was a tool, not an identity. But now my son was embarrassed by me, worried that his poor father might not measure up to his fiancée's successful family. I'd spent 4 decades in business, and I'd learned something important. You only see people's true character when they think you're beneath them. When they believe you have nothing to offer, no power to wield, no influence to grant. A slow smile spread across my face as I finished my coffee. I'd spent my career reading people, understanding their motivations, their weaknesses. The restaurant business was tough. I knew that much from the energy contracts I'd signed with hospitality groups over the years. Saturday evening was going to be very interesting indeed. The Chambers family was about to meet Brady's father. They had their expectations about successful business owners and simple working men. I had 5 days to prepare, 5 days to decide exactly how this meeting would go. They had no idea what was coming. The research began Tuesday afternoon. I pulled up my laptop, nothing fancy, just a basic Dell I'd bought 3 years ago, and started digging into the Chambers Restaurant Group. Their website was polished professional. 8 locations across Colorado from Denver to Vail. Family-owned since 1987. The usual corporate speak about excellence in hospitality and serving communities with pride. Local business journals painted a clearer picture. Lorenzo Chambers had started with a single diner in Pueblo, worked his way up through smart acquisitions and strategic locations. The Denver Post had featured them last year, gross revenue approaching $800,000 annually. Respectable, but not exactly Fortune 500 territory. I bookmarked a few articles, memorized key details. 8 restaurants, 37 years in business, recent expansion into the ski resort market. These weren't billionaires, but they'd done well for themselves, well enough to develop opinions about who belonged at their table. Wednesday morning, I dug through my storage closet hunting for clothes I hadn't worn in decades. There, behind Christmas decorations and old tax returns, I found what I was looking for: my original work shirts from the wind farms. Faded blue cotton, permanent stains from hydraulic fluid. Name patch long since removed. The boots were there too, steel-toed Timberlands that had seen real labor, real weather. I tried them on. Still fit, though they felt strange after years of business casual. The mirror showed me a different man, someone who worked with his hands, worried about overtime, counted every dollar. It was like stepping back in time, back to who I'd been before the promotions, before the corner office. Thursday I practiced. Sounds ridiculous, but I walked differently in those clothes, talked differently, dropped my shoulders, softened my voice, added hesitation where confidence used to live. I studied my reflection, memorizing the posture of humility, the expression of someone grateful for whatever kindness came his way. Brady called Friday evening right as I was heating up a frozen dinner. "Dad, I wanted to give you more details about tomorrow." His voice carried that same nervous energy. "The Chambers family, they're really something. Lorenzo owns 8 restaurants, and Cordelia manages the operations. They've got a house in Cherry Hills Village, drive matching BMWs. I stirred my mac and cheese, letting him talk. "Sailor says they're generous people, but they have high standards. They believe in success, in building something meaningful with your life." "Sounds like good people," I said carefully. "They are. I just want everything to go smoothly tomorrow night." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, wrestling with doubt. Was I being unfair? Maybe the Chambers family would surprise me. Maybe they'd see past appearances, treat a retired maintenance worker with genuine respect. But Brady's words echoed: high standards, success, building something meaningful. Code words. Polite ways of saying they measured people by their achievements, their status, their worth on paper. I'd raised my son to be better than that. Apparently I'd failed somewhere along the way. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, typical November weather in Colorado. I dressed slowly, deliberately. The old work shirt, faded jeans boots that had walked through mud and machinery. I grabbed my simplest wallet, black leather, worn thin, containing exactly $43 in cash and a basic debit card. Hidden behind it, barely visible, was another card entirely, black heavy with my name embossed in silver, but that one would stay hidden, for now. The drive to Colorado Springs would take 90 minutes. 90 minutes to transform completely from Peter Crawford, regional director, to Pete, the retired guy who fixed wind turbines for 30 years. I started the Honda and pulled onto I-25 South. The mountains rose ahead of me, snow-capped and eternal. Somewhere in those peaks was the Broadmoor, where my son's future in-laws waited to meet the man who'd raised him. Time to see what kind of people they really were. The Broadmoor rose before me like something from a different world. Manicured lawns stretched in perfect lines, fountains sparkled under evening lights, and luxury cars filled the circular drive. BMWs, Mercedes, a few Teslas. My Honda looked like a rust bucket among thoroughbreds. I parked in the farthest corner of the lot, checking my reflection one last time. The work shirt hung loose on my frame, the boots scuffed and practical. Perfect. I grabbed my worn wallet, locked the car, and walked toward the entrance. The lobby hit me with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the soft murmur of wealth. Guests glided past in designer clothes, their conversations peppered with talk of ski seasons and wine collections. I felt every eye on me, cataloging my appearance, filing me away under "doesn't belong." "Dad!" Brady's voice cut through the ambient music. He approached with quick steps, Sailor beside him. My son looked sharp in his navy blazer, every inch the successful pilot. But his smile seemed forced, his shoulders tense. "You made good time," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Traffic was light. I turned to Sailor, extending my hand. "You must be Sailor. Brady talks about you constantly." She shook my hand briefly, her grip polite but distant. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Crawford." Her smile was practiced, the kind flight attendants perfected for difficult passengers. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "My parents are already at the table," she said, gesturing toward the restaurant. "They're excited to meet you." We walked through corridors lined with oil paintings and fresh flowers. Other guests nodded at Brady, and Sailor ignored me completely. I might as well have been invisible. The restaurant was all dark wood and soft lighting, tables spaced for private conversations. In the corner, near windows overlooking the golf course, sat a couple who had to be the Chambers. Lorenzo was a big man, silver-haired and confident, wearing a suit that fit like it was tailored yesterday. Cordelia sat beside him, elegant in emerald silk jewelry catching the light. They looked up as we approached, and I watched their faces change. Lorenzo's welcoming smile flickered slightly. Cordelia's eyes swept over my clothes, my boots, my general appearance. The assessment was quick, thorough, and unmistakably dismissive. Mom, Dad Sailor said, "This is Brady's father, Peter Crawford." Lorenzo stood, extending his hand. His grip was firm, businessman strong, but brief. "Peter, pleasure to meet you. I'm Lorenzo. This is my wife, Cordelia." Cordelia offered her hand like she was bestowing a favor. How lovely to finally meet Brady's father. The waiter appeared, guiding us to our seats. Somehow I ended up in the chair facing away from the view, the one with a slight wobble. The others settled into plush seats with perfect sightlines of the mountains. "Beautiful evening," I said, looking around the dining room. "This is quite a place." "We come here often," Lorenzo replied, settling his napkin. "The Broadmoor maintains certain standards. We appreciate that." The menus arrived leather-bound heavy, written in elegant script. No prices listed, which meant they were expensive enough to scare away anyone who had to ask. "The wine list here is exceptional," Cordelia said, flipping through pages. "We're thinking of adding some of these selections to our restaurants." 8 locations now," Lorenzo added, his voice carrying pride. "Started with one little diner in Pueblo, built it into something substantial." Brady shifted in his seat. "Dad used to work in energy, wind farms mostly." "How interesting," Cordelia said in a tone that suggested it wasn't interesting at all. "That must have been demanding work?" The waiter returned, pen poised. "Can I start you with cocktails this evening?" Lorenzo ordered a $25 scotch. Cordelia chose wine from a bottle that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries this month. Brady and Sailor followed suit with premium selections. "Just water for me," I said. "Ice water's fine." The waiter nodded and disappeared. An awkward silence settled over the table, broken only by the soft clink of silverware from nearby tables. Lorenzo cleared his throat, leaning forward slightly. "So, Peter, tell us about yourself." The question hung in the air like expensive cologne. I folded my hands on the white tablecloth, letting a moment pass before answering. "Well, I spent most of my career doing maintenance work. Energy facilities, mostly wind farms across Colorado and Wyoming." I kept my voice humble. Honest work, nothing glamorous. Lorenzo nodded, already categorizing me. "Wind energy, that's growing these days. Clean power, good for the environment." I was lucky to be part of something meaningful. Cordelia leaned forward, emerald earrings catching the light. "Oh, how practical." That must have been demanding physical work, all that manual labor. The way she said manual labor made it sound like a disease. I didn't mind it. There's satisfaction in keeping things running. Sailor spoke up honey-sweet with condescension. "It's so admirable how you embrace that simple lifestyle, Peter. Not everyone can appreciate minimalism the way you do." Brady shifted uncomfortably. "Dad's always been independent." "Independence is wonderful," Lorenzo cut in smoothly. "But we all need family support. That's what makes us human." The appetizers arrived, delicate arrangements that looked like art. I'd chosen the simplest salad, still probably worth a full Denny's meal. "So you're retired now?" Lorenzo continued. "Fixed income, I imagine. I get by, don't need much." Cordelia made a sympathetic sound. "Denver winters must be challenging for someone your age living alone. The heating bills?" "I manage fine. Keep the thermostat low." Brady stared at his plate, clearly uncomfortable. Sailor placed a possessive hand on his arm. "I just worry about Brady having to think about additional responsibilities," Sailor said softly. "He works so hard already. A pilot's schedule is demanding without extra concerns." There it was. I was a burden. A liability Brady would have to manage. Lorenzo raised his scotch. "Family is everything, Peter. When we built our restaurant business, we did it thinking about legacy, creating something substantial. 8 locations now," Cordelia added proudly. "Started with nothing but determination." "That's impressive," I said, meaning it. The restaurant business teaches you about people, about value quality. You learn to recognize what lasts and what doesn't. Another loaded comment. I was apparently in the doesn't last category. Brady found his voice. "Dad taught me about hard work, too, about doing your job right." "Of course," Cordelia said quickly. "All honest work has dignity," but their tone suggested otherwise. "Success means different things." Lorenzo continued. Some folks are content with simplicity. Others want to build something bigger. Sailor nodded. That's why Brady and I connect. We both have ambitions beyond just getting by. The implication was clear. I was the getting by type, the man who aimed low and achieved less. I took another bite of overpriced salad, letting their words settle. Around us, other diners enjoyed their expensive meals, their comfortable assumptions about who belonged. Family should take care of each other, Lorenzo said finally, his eyes meeting mine directly. Don't you think Peter... I nodded slowly as if considering the wisdom of his words. I suppose they should. The main courses arrived with theatrical precision servers in crisp white shirts, presenting plates like precious artifacts. Lorenzo's steak looked like it cost more than my monthly electric bill. Cordelia's salmon was artfully arranged with microgreens I couldn't pronounce. My chicken breast, the most modest option, still came with enough garnish to feed a small family. Exactly, Lorenzo said, cutting into his meat with surgical precision. That's why Cordelia and I wanted to have this conversation tonight. We've been blessed with success, and we believe in sharing that blessing. He paused to chew, letting the weight of his generosity settle over the table. Sailor leaned forward, her voice soft with manufactured concern. Brady works so incredibly hard, Peter. All those cross-country flights, the irregular schedule, the pressure of keeping passengers safe. I just want him to focus on his career without any distractions. The word distractions hung between us like a loaded gun. She meant me, of course. I was the distraction. The aging father who might need help, might call at inconvenient times, might require Brady to choose between his wife and his old man. What Sailor means, Lorenzo continued, is that young couples need space to build their foundation, to establish their own traditions, their own priorities. Brady set down his fork. This isn't necessary. Dad doesn't need... I placed my hand gently on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. It's okay, son. They mean well. Lorenzo smiled triumphantly. See, your father understands. He's a practical man. Cordelia dabbed her lips with her napkin. We've given this considerable thought, Peter. A monthly stipend, nothing extravagant, but enough to ensure you're comfortable. Maybe $500, $600? The amount was carefully calculated enough to sound generous to them, not enough to actually change my life. Enough to make me grateful, dependent, manageable. That's very kind, I said, quietly playing my role. But I couldn't accept charity. It's not charity, Lorenzo said quickly. It's family investment. We're investing in Brady's peace of mind and Sailor's happiness. When they don't have to worry about your situation, they can focus on building their future together. My situation, as if poverty was a medical condition I'd contracted through poor life choices. And in return, Cordelia added sweetly, we'd just ask that you give them space. Let them establish their marriage without feeling obligated to check on you constantly. Young love needs room to breathe. Brady's jaw tightened. Mom, Cordelia, that's not... Brady, honey, Sailor interrupted, her hand finding his again. They're trying to help. We all want what's best for everyone. The restaurant hummed around us with the comfortable sounds of wealth. Crystal clinking quiet laughter, the soft murmur of people who'd never worried about heating bills or grocery budgets. At a nearby table, a woman was showing off photos of her recent European vacation. Think about it practically, Lorenzo pressed. $600 a month, maybe $700 if needed. That's real money for someone on a fixed income. It could make the difference between struggling and living with dignity. Living with dignity, as if dignity could be purchased in monthly installments. We're not asking you to disappear, Cordelia clarified, just to understand that Brady has a new life now, new responsibilities, a wife who deserves his full attention. I looked around the table at Lorenzo's confident smile, at Cordelia's practiced compassion, at Sailor's calculated sweetness, at my son torn between loyalty and social pressure, trying to navigate waters he'd never learned to swim in. That's very generous of you, I said finally. I'll need to think about it. Lorenzo raised his wine glass. Of course, take all the time you need. But remember, Peter pride is expensive. Sometimes the wisest thing's to accept help when it's offered. He took a sip of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Think about our offer, Peter. Family takes care of family. The plate sat before us, evidence of an expensive meal half consumed. Lorenzo had barely touched his $40 steak. Cordelia's salmon lay artfully destroyed, more pushed around than eaten. My chicken, the cheapest option, was nearly finished old habits from a childhood where you cleaned your plate or went hungry. Sailor dabbed her lips with the cloth napkin, leaving a faint trace of lipstick on the pristine white fabric. That was delicious. I'm so full I can barely move. The portions here are always generous. Lorenzo agreed, leaning back in his chair with the satisfied air of a man who'd never worried about the cost of a meal. Cordelia caught the waiter's attention with a subtle gesture, the kind wealthy people perfected for summoning service. "Excuse me, could you please box up these leftovers?" The young waiter nodded professionally. "Of course, ma'am. All of them?" "Yes, please." She turned to me with a smile that looked benevolent, but felt condescending. "Peter, you should take this home. Waste not want, not, right?" The restaurant seemed to quiet around us, or maybe that was just my imagination. But I could feel eyes turning our way, other diners registering the scene, the well-dressed family, having their leftovers packed for the shabby older man at their table. "This food costs more than—" Cordelia paused delicately. "Well, you understand." She said it loud enough that the couple at the neighboring table glanced over. The woman's eyes swept over my work shirt, my weathered hands, my general appearance, and I saw her whisper something to her husband. Brady's face flushed red. "Mom, Cordelia, that's not— It's practical." "Brady," Sailor interrupted smoothly, her voice honey-sweet with false kindness. "Peter probably appreciates not having to cook tomorrow. Don't you, Peter?" All eyes were on me now. The waiter stood frozen, uncertain whether to proceed. The neighboring table had stopped pretending not to listen. Even the sommelier had paused in his wine presentation to another table. "That's very thoughtful." I managed the words, tasting like sawdust. "Thank you." The waiter moved with obvious discomfort, carefully transferring expensive remnants into styrofoam containers. Lorenzo's barely touched steak, worth more than most people's daily wages. Cordelia's designer salmon, even the untouched bread rolls and herb butter. "We always take care of our family." "Peter," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying across the dining room. "That's just who we are." The words hit like a public announcement. "This man needs our charity. This man can't afford to waste food. This man is so poor he's grateful for our table scraps." I watched the waiter's hands shake slightly as he sealed the containers. He was young, probably working his way through college, and his embarrassment was almost as acute as mine. He'd served hundreds of wealthy families, but he'd probably never had to package leftovers for someone's charity case. "There you go, sir," he said quietly, placing the bag beside my chair. The containers clinked together like coins in a beggar's cup. "Thank you," I said again, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Sailor beamed at me. "Now you won't have to worry about meals for days. Isn't that wonderful?" Wonderful, as if being handed scraps like a stray dog was some kind of blessing. The couple at the next table was openly staring now. The woman leaned toward her husband, whispering behind her hand. I caught fragments. "So sad. At least they're helping." "Must be difficult." Brady looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. His hands were clenched in his lap, his jaw tight with mortification. But he said nothing, did nothing. Just sat there while his fiancée's family publicly humiliated his father. "The thing about family," Cordelia continued, apparently unaware of or unconcerned by the spectacle she'd created, "is that we support each other through difficult times. Some people are too proud to accept help, but real family doesn't let pride get in the way of practical needs." The waiter returned with the check presenter a black leather folder that he placed carefully beside Lorenzo's elbow. Even from across the table I could see the total through the transparent pocket, $1,850. Lorenzo reached for it with the casual confidence of a man who'd never had a card declined, never counted change, never wondered if he had enough. "This one's on us," he announced. "Family celebration." Lorenzo reached for his wallet with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to picking up expensive tabs. He selected a platinum card, the kind banks reserve for their most valued customers, and slid it into the leather presenter without even glancing at the total. "Family celebration," he repeated, signaling the waiter with a confident nod. The young man returned quickly, card reader in hand. Lorenzo inserted his card with a flourish, already reaching for his phone to check messages while the transaction processed. The reader beeped. Once, twice. The waiter's expression shifted from professional courtesy to concern. "I'm sorry, sir, but this card has been declined." Lorenzo looked up sharply. "That's impossible. Try it again." The waiter complied, running the card a second time. Same result. Same apologetic beep. "There must be some system error," Lorenzo said, his voice losing its earlier confidence. That card has a very high limit. Cordelia leaned closer, whispering urgently, "Try the business account card." Other diners were beginning to notice the commotion. The couple who'd witnessed my earlier humiliation now watched with undisguised curiosity. A waiter at a nearby table slowed his pace, clearly listening. Lorenzo fumbled through his wallet, producing another card. "This one's connected to our restaurant accounts. Much higher limit." The reader beeped its rejection again. "Sir," the waiter said quietly, "perhaps you could call your bank. Sometimes there are security holds when—" "I know how credit cards work." Lorenzo snapped, his face reddening. He was checking his phone frantically, now scrolling through banking apps, his earlier composure evaporating. The silence at our table was deafening. Brady stared at his hands. Sailor's perfect smile had frozen in place. Cordelia whispered suggestions that grew more desperate with each failed attempt. "Perhaps I could help," I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. Lorenzo paused his frantic phone checking. I reached into my worn wallet past the basic debit card and withdrew the other card, the one I'd kept hidden. Heavy black metal. "No spending limit," my name, embossed in silver letters. Peter Crawford, Regional Director. The waiter's entire demeanor changed the moment he saw it. His eyes widened with recognition. He'd probably seen fewer than a dozen of these cards in his career. "Of course, Mr. Crawford," he said with newfound respect. "I'll process this immediately." The transaction went through in seconds. No beeps, no declines, no drama. Just the quiet efficiency of unlimited corporate purchasing power. "Actually," I said as the waiter prepared to leave, "there's something you all should know about me." The table fell silent. Even the neighboring diners seemed to lean in. I'm not exactly a retired maintenance worker. I kept my voice calm, conversational. I'm the Regional Director of Rocky Mountain Renewable Energy. We manage wind and solar farms across 7 states. Brady's mouth fell open. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I wanted you to grow up understanding that a person's worth isn't measured by their paycheck." I turned to Lorenzo, whose face had gone pale. "My salary is $48,000. Per month?" Cordelia made a small choking sound. "But here's the interesting part, Lorenzo." I leaned forward slightly. "Your restaurant group uses quite a bit of electricity. 8 locations, industrial kitchens, walk-in freezers, heating and cooling systems running around the clock." Lorenzo's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. "Your monthly energy bill averages $28,000 every month for the past 3 years. I smiled. "I personally review and approve all contracts over $25,000. The silence was absolute. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade. "You see, Lorenzo, you're not just meeting Brady's father tonight. You're having dinner with your energy supplier, the man who signs off on keeping your lights on your freezers running your restaurants operational." I let that sink in for a moment. "In fact, you're one of our most valued commercial clients. I've probably signed a dozen contracts with your company over the years." Lorenzo stared at me like I'd just announced I was from another planet. Cordelia's jewelry suddenly seemed less impressive. Sailor's confident smile had completely disappeared. Brady was shaking his head in amazement. "Dad, I had no idea. All these years you thought I was just a poor old man who needed your charity," I said, looking around the table. "Someone you could help with $600 a month in doggy bags." The waiter returned with my card and the receipt. "Thank you, Mr. Crawford. I hope you enjoyed your evening." "Very educational," I replied. Lorenzo finally found his voice. "Peter, we had no idea." I stood up, pocketing my card. The doggy bag sat beside my chair like evidence of their judgment. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't." The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Lorenzo's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Cordelia's flawless makeup couldn't hide the flush rising up her neck. Sailor stared at the table as if escape might appear there. Finally, Lorenzo spoke. "Peter, we had no idea. We never meant, we wouldn't have—" His voice faltered, the confident businessman reduced to a man scrambling for solid ground. "It was all a misunderstanding," Cordelia added, her poise shattered. "We were just trying to be helpful. We thought. We assumed." "You assumed exactly what I wanted you to assume," I said evenly. "And you showed me exactly who you are." Sailor looked up, panic flickering in her eyes. "Mr. Crawford, I hope you don't think we were being disrespectful. We genuinely care about Brady's happiness." "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you care about what Brady can provide, his pilot's salary, his stability, how neatly he fits into your world?" The neighboring table had stopped pretending not to listen. Other diners craned their necks, eager for the drama. I lifted the doggy bag beside my chair, its styrofoam containers, a quiet reminder of their judgment. This is in my car now, Cordelia. Very thoughtful of you to make sure I wouldn't go hungry. She winced as if I'd struck her. And Lorenzo, I continued each month. When your energy bills cross my desk, $28,000 on schedule, I'll remember this evening. I'll remember how you treated a man you thought had nothing. Brady stood abruptly. Dad, can we talk privately? We stepped toward the restaurant's entrance. His face was a mixture of shame, amazement, and something close to relief. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry I was embarrassed by you. Sorry I didn't defend you more. Sorry I let them treat you like what I appeared to be. I finished. Brady, you did defend me. Maybe not as strongly as you could have, but you tried. That matters. But why didn't you ever tell me about your job, your salary, any of it? I looked at my son, this good man I'd raised who had gotten lost in other people's expectations. Because I wanted you to respect people for who they are not, what they have. To understand that worth isn't measured by a bank account. I do understand that, he said. I learned it from you. Did you? Then why were you nervous about me meeting them? Why ask me to dress nicely? His shoulders sagged. Because I got caught up in their world. I started seeing myself through their eyes, and I was afraid they'd see you the same way. We returned to the table. The Chambers family sat frozen discomfort thick in the air. Sailor, I said, Brady deserves someone who loves him for who he is, not what he provides, or how he looks in your family's world. If you can't be that person, let him find someone who can. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Lorenzo, Cordelia. I added, you've built something impressive with your restaurants, but success without character is only expensive emptiness. I picked up my keys. Thank you for dinner. It was educational. The drive back to Denver was silent for 20 minutes. Then Brady spoke. What happens now? Now you decide what kind of man you want to be. What kind of husband, what kind of father someday. Whether you'll build a life on appearances or substance. And sailor? That's for you to decide. But remember, if someone loves you only when you're successful, what happens when life gets hard? We drove through the mountain darkness, headlights cutting through the night. Below us, Denver's lights spread like scattered diamonds. Dad, yeah, I'm proud of you. Not because of your job or your money, but because you taught me something tonight about dignity and how to treat people. That's all I ever wanted, son. Will you tell me about your work sometime? The real story. I smiled. I'd like that. As we pulled into my apartment complex, Brady looked around with new eyes. You could live anywhere? Why here? Because this is enough, I said. Because I don't need to prove anything to anyone, except apparently to those who think a man's worth can be measured by his address. The Chambers family learned something tonight, too. Maybe, but that's not why I did it. I did it for you to show you that respect isn't bought or inherited. It's earned by how you treat others, especially those you think can't offer you anything. We sat in silence for a moment, father and son understanding each other better than we had in years. Thanks, Dad. You're welcome, son. Looking back on that evening at the Broadmoor, I realized God had a plan all along. He placed me in a situation where I could teach not just the Chambers family, but my own son about the true meaning of worth. As I've learned throughout my life, the Almighty doesn't measure us by our bank accounts or job titles. He measures us by how we treat others, especially those we think are beneath us. This true story taught me that sometimes we need to walk in different shoes to understand people's hearts. The grandpa stories my own father used to tell me about respect and dignity suddenly made perfect sense that night. When God gives us success, it's not meant to elevate us above others, but to humble us and remind us of our responsibility to treat everyone with kindness. Brady learned something precious that evening, that his father's greatest wealth wasn't the $48,000 monthly salary, but the values I'd tried to instill in him. These grandpa stories become the legacy we pass down, the true story of who we really are when nobody's watching. The true story is simple. Never judge someone by their appearance or circumstances. You never know if the person you're dismissing might be the very one who controls your destiny. More importantly, grandpa stories like this remind us that character is the only currency that truly matters in God's eyes. What do you think about this lesson? Have you ever experienced something similar where appearances were deceiving? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your own stories about respect and dignity. If this touched your heart, please share it with others who might need this reminder, and don't forget to subscribe for more meaningful life lessons. Sometimes the most powerful truths come from the most unexpected places. After my son-in-law Silas robbed me of $225,000 and my wife's jewelry, he had the audacity to invite me to see his new luxury lifestyle bought with my stolen money. I smiled and congratulated them while planning their destruction. 2 weeks later, he was begging through tears, "Please stop, we'll lose everything." But it was already too late. My revenge was cold and calculated. But before I tell you exactly how I caught them red-handed and made them hit that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments what time it is in your part of the world right now. The Florida Keys had been perfect for 3 days. Clear skies, calm waters, and red snapper biting like they hadn't seen a hook in months. I'd needed that peace after the chaos of the past year. Losing Margaret, watching Rachel struggle through her grief, and trying to adjust to having Silas as part of our family. Sometimes a man just needs to cast a line and let the world fade away. But peace never lasts. I pulled into my driveway on Bayshore Boulevard just as the Tampa sun was setting behind the oak trees. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Rachel's Honda wasn't in the guest parking area, and neither was Silas's old Civic. Probably out to dinner, I figured. Young couples do that. The feeling hit me when I reached my study. The safe door hung open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. My legs went weak. 43 years of marriage and Margaret's jewelry had never left that safe except for special occasions. The diamond necklace I'd bought her for our 20th anniversary. Her grandmother's pearl earrings from the old country. The wedding ring she'd worn until the cancer made her fingers too thin to hold it. All gone. I dropped my fishing gear and stumbled forward. The cash compartment stared back at me empty as a grave. $225,000. My entire retirement fund that I'd kept liquid for emergencies. Margaret had always worried about banks failing, said cash was king. I'd humored her, never imagining someone would walk into our home and take everything we'd worked for. My hands shook as I dialed 911. Tampa Police Department. I need to report a theft, a major theft. Detective Johnson arrived within the hour. Mid-40s, tired eyes that had seen too much, the kind of cop who measured his words carefully. He examined the safe with the methodical precision of a man who'd investigated hundreds of break-ins. No scratches on the lock mechanism, he noted, running his finger along the steel. No drill marks, no pry damage. Whoever did this knew the combination. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. Mr. Mercer, I need to ask, who has access to this safe? I sank into my desk chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. 3 people. Myself, my daughter Rachel, and her husband Silas. They've been living in the guest wing for about a year. Johnson's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He'd already drawn his conclusions. The combination. Is it written down anywhere, stored on a phone or computer? No, memorized only. I changed it 6 months ago after Margaret passed. He nodded slowly, making notes in his pad. What exactly was taken? Cash. My retirement savings. $225,000. And my late wife's jewelry collection. The words came out flat, clinical. 35 years as a financial advisor had taught me to separate emotion from facts, even when those facts felt like they were tearing my chest open. Johnson closed his notepad and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. Mr. Mercer, without evidence of forced entry, we're looking at someone who knew that combination. You understand what that means? I understood. I just couldn't accept it. This is an inside job, Mr. Mercer, someone you trust. After he left, I sat alone in my study staring at that empty safe. The house creaked around me, familiar sounds that had once meant comfort. Now they felt like accusations. Rachel would never steal from me. She was Margaret's daughter, honest to her core, sometimes to a fault. And Silas, well, he might be a little rough around the edges, but he loved Rachel. He wouldn't destroy his marriage over money. But if not them, then who? 4 sleepless nights later, the rumble of an expensive engine shattered my morning quiet. Through the kitchen blinds, I watched a silver BMW X5 glide into my driveway, temporary tags gleaming. Silas stepped out like he owned the world, running his hand along the pristine hood. My neighbor Patterson shuffled over in his bathrobe. Beautiful machine, son. Business treating you well. Silas puffed his chest. Sometimes you've got to invest in yourself. Rachel deserves the best. My stomach dropped. 4 days ago, he'd driven a rattling Honda Civic and borrowed $40 for gas. Now he was discussing investment strategies. Rachel burst through the front door, radiant with excitement I hadn't seen since before Margaret's death. Dad, perfect timing. She hugged me tight, expensive perfume replacing her usual drugstore scent. We have amazing news. We're buying a house. A house? In Hyde Park? You have to see it. It's everything Mom dreamed of for us. Before I could think, I was squeezed into the BMW's leather interior, watching Tampa's most exclusive neighborhood roll past. The house sat on a tree-lined street where mailboxes cost more than cars. $450,000, Rachel said dreamily as we toured the Spanish-tiled mansion. I know it sounds like a lot, but Silas says we can afford it. That's when I saw it. Margaret's diamond necklace hung around Rachel's neck, catching light from the bay windows. The 20th anniversary gift I'd bought my wife. The one locked in my safe 4 days ago. My chest tightened like a vice. Rachel, my voice strangled. That necklace. She touched it, beaming. Isn't it beautiful? Thank you for letting Silas give me Mom's necklace, Dad. It means so much to have something of hers. Silas appeared beside her arm, sliding possessively around her waist. Your dad wanted you to have it now instead of waiting, he said smoothly, eyes challenging mine. Family heirlooms should be worn, not locked away. Right, Travis. Every instinct screamed to rip it off her neck, demand explanations, call Detective Johnson. But Rachel looked at me with such gratitude that words died in my throat. Of course, I heard myself whisper. Your mother would want you to wear it. The drive home blurred past manicured lawns while Rachel chattered about furniture. I sat frozen, watching my daughter's reflection, knowing she had no idea she was wearing stolen goods. No idea her husband had made me an accomplice to my own robbery. In my driveway, I gripped the steering wheel with shaking hands. The numbers wouldn't stop running. BMW X5, 60,000. House down payment, 90,000. Margaret's jewelry, priceless. How could they afford all this? Unless the police weren't helping. Detective Johnson's last call made it clear. Without new evidence, my case was dead in the water. But 35 years managing money had taught me that sometimes you take matters into your own hands. David Brooks ran his private investigation business from downtown Tampa. 20 years of digging into people's secrets had given him sharp eyes and a firm handshake. Financial cases are my specialty, he said, settling behind his cluttered desk. What makes you think your son-in-law is stealing? I explained the timeline. Safe emptied during my fishing trip, sudden wealth appearing days later. Brooks listened, occasionally scribbling notes. $60,000 BMW on $55,000 salary, he mused. Financially impossible. The house, $450,000. They'd need $90,000 down minimum. Brooks whistled. $150,000 in cash purchases within a week of your theft. That's evidence, not coincidence. He started with basics. Employment verification, credit reports, bank records. Silas worked IT support for a medical billing company, exactly the salary claimed. No bonuses, no inheritance, nothing. On paper, barely scraping by. Here's where it gets interesting, Brooks said at our second meeting, sliding an old Dell laptop across his desk. Silas abandoned this at a repair shop 6 months ago. Shop owner was disposing of it. My hands shook as he opened a folder labeled Mercer Research. Inside were dozens of files that made my blood freeze. Daily routine Travis.doc. House layout Bayshore PDF. Fishing schedule 2023 XLSX. Safe location Photos JPG. Each file cataloged my life like I was a specimen. Fishing schedules matched my actual trips. House layouts showed every room, every entrance. Study photos captured my safe from multiple angles. When were these created? I dreaded the answer. Brooks checked file properties. Oldest ones date back 24 months. Newest from 3 months ago around your daughter's engagement announcement. 24 months. 2 years of surveillance before he'd even proposed to Rachel. Every smile, every kiss, every family dinner had been calculated to get closer to my money. There's more. Brooks opened Financial Assets Estimate.doc. He's tracked your net worth, spending habits, insurance policies. This man knows your finances better than you do. I stared at spreadsheets reducing my life to numbers. Margaret's jewelry listed with estimated values. Retirement accounts documented to the penny. Even my fishing gear cataloged for potential resale. The room spun as the truth hit me. Rachel's whirlwind romance hadn't been love. She'd been targeted. Silas hadn't fallen for my daughter. He'd hunted her to get to me. Mr. Mercer, Brooks said quietly, I've seen plenty of theft cases. This level of premeditation is rare. Most criminals are opportunistic. Wrong place, wrong time, quick cash grab. He gestured at the laptop screen filled with my surveilled life. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was a long-term plan. The laptop revelation kept me awake for 3 straight nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those surveillance photos of my study, my safe, my life reduced to a criminal's research project. But if Silas thought he could study me like some lab rat, he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated what a financial advisor learns about investigating patterns. I need you to dig deeper, I told Brooks when I called him the next morning. This level of planning doesn't happen in a vacuum. There have to be others. Brooks worked his contacts across the Southeast, cross-referencing databases for similar crimes. What he found made my stomach turn. Eleanor Walsh, Savannah, Georgia, 18 months ago, he reported spreading photos across his desk. 62-year-old widow lost her husband to a heart attack. Daughter brings home a charming boyfriend named Samuel Brooks. The photos showed a silver-haired woman with kind eyes standing next to a young woman who looked heartbreakingly similar to Rachel. Blonde, trusting, eager to please. Samuel courted the daughter for 8 months. Moved into Eleanor's guest house, gained her complete trust. One weekend, while Eleanor visited her sister in Atlanta, her safe was cleaned out. $150,000 in cash plus family jewelry dating back 4 generations. And Samuel vanished. Daughter found a note saying he'd gotten a job offer in California and couldn't handle long-distance relationships. Eleanor died 6 months later. Friends said she never recovered from the betrayal. The second case hit even closer to home. Patricia Williams, a Korean War veteran's widow in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her daughter Jennifer had met Samuel at a coffee shop near her nursing job. Same pattern. Whirlwind romance, moving into the family home, earning the mother's trust. Patricia lost $200,000. Brooks continued. Her entire life savings plus her husband's Purple Heart and Bronze Star medals. Samuel disappeared the day before Jennifer's birthday, leaving behind fake business cards and a bogus forwarding address. I stared at the case files, seeing Rachel's future written in these women's pain. How long between victims? 18 months from Eleanor to Patricia. 14 months from Patricia to your daughter. He's getting more confident, moving faster. The name change made perfect sense now. Samuel Brooks had burned too many bridges, left too many broken families in his wake. Silas Brooks was his fresh start, his new hunting license. Your daughter isn't his wife, Mr. Mercer? Brooks said quietly. She's his cover story. His way into your house, your trust, your safe combination. The moment he empties your accounts, she becomes a liability. He'll discard like the others. Rage burned through me like acid, not just for what he'd done to me, but for what he was doing to Rachel. My daughter thought she'd found love, built a future. Instead, she'd been groomed by a predator who saw her as nothing more than a key to my money. What's your next move? Brooks asked. I thought about Eleanor Walsh dying of a broken heart, about Patricia Williams losing her husband's war medals, about Rachel's trusting smile when she'd shown me that stolen necklace. Violence would be easy. One phone call to certain people I'd met in my decades of financial consulting, and Silas would simply disappear. But that would make me no better than him, and it wouldn't give these other families justice. I'm going to destroy him, I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. But I'm going to do it legally, methodically, the same way he planned to destroy me. Brooks raised an eyebrow. You have something in mind. I stood up, feeling more focused than I had in weeks. 35 years of managing money, understanding financial systems, knowing how the law worked. Silas had researched my vulnerabilities, but he'd missed my strengths. If he wants to play games, I'll show him how a financial advisor fights back. Marcus Webb's downtown Tampa office overlooked the Hillsborough River. 30 years of corporate litigation had taught him that the best revenge was methodical, legal, and devastating. You want to destroy someone who's stolen from you, he said, reviewing Brooks's files, but by the book. He studied me for 2 years. Now it's my turn to study him. Webb pulled up Silas's financial profile. Outstanding tax debt from 2022 and 2023, $8,500 unpaid for 18 months. Can I buy that debt? Absolutely. We create an LLC, purchase the tax lien. Once you own it, you're his creditor. Within a week, Desert Peak Holdings, LLC existed with Webb as registered agent and me as anonymous owner. The tax lien cost $9,000, a bargain for the leverage it provided. But that was just the opening move. The IRS loves anonymous tips about unreported income, Webb explained. especially large cash purchases inconsistent with declared earnings. Form 3949A was simple. Taxpayer Silas Brooks. Suspected unreported income $80,000. Evidence BMW house down payment lifestyle exceeding $55,000 salary. Submitted electronically, completely untraceable. The third prong required calling FBI agent Rebecca Thompson, who specialized in interstate fraud. Brooks had contacted her about Eleanor Walsh and Patricia Williams. "We've been looking for connections between these cases," she said. "Your evidence could build our federal prosecution." April brought results. The IRS demanded documentation for Silas's 2024 tax return, specifically the source of $80,000 in cash transactions with no legitimate origin. I watched from my kitchen as Silas paced his driveway phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically. By evening, he'd hired tax attorney Richard Hammond at $300 per hour. The $5,000 retainer came from their house fund. May escalated pressure. Desert Peak Holdings demanded $12,000. Original debt plus accumulated interest and legal fees. 30 days to pay or face asset seizure. The stress showed. Rachel mentioned Silas working late, drinking more, snapping over minor expenses. "Dad Silas seems really worried," Rachel confided during a visit. "He keeps checking mail, looking over his shoulder. Yesterday I caught him going through financial papers like he was searching for something. Maybe he's being more careful with money," I suggested neutrally. "Last night he was on the phone with someone and said, 'Someone knows about us. We might need to run.'" My pulse quickened. The paranoia was setting in perfectly. Silas realized he'd made enemies, but had no idea how close they were. "Run, that seems extreme?" Rachel shrugged, worry creasing her features. I asked what he meant, but he said, "Work stress." What if someone's really threatening him? What if we're in danger? Perfect irony. Silas suspected he was being hunted, unaware his hunter sat across from his wife, offering comfort while tightening the noose. "I'm sure it's nothing, sweetheart. But if you're worried, stay here a few days." The trap was working exactly as planned. "Someone knows about us. We might need to run." The pounding on my front door came at 8:30 on a Thursday evening, violent enough to rattle the windows. I'd been expecting this moment for weeks, ever since Desert Peak Holdings had tightened the screws. Through the peephole, I saw Silas's face twisted with rage, papers clutched in his fist. I opened the door calmly, as if welcoming a neighbor borrowing sugar. "Good evening, Silas. Something I can help you with." He shoved past me into the foyer, waving legal documents like weapons. "Cut the act, old man. I know you're behind this harassment. I'm afraid I don't understand what you're talking about." I closed the door quietly, noting how his hands shook with fury. "Would you like some coffee? You seem agitated." Desert Peak Holdings. He thrust the demand letter in my face. $12,000 for some bullshit tax debt I paid years ago. Then the IRS crawling up my ass about income I never made. "You think I'm stupid?" I settled into my favorite armchair, gesturing for him to sit. He remained standing, pacing like a caged animal. "Silas, I run a small financial consulting business. I have no idea what Desert Peak Holdings is." "Liar." Spit flew from his lips. "You've been sabotaging me from the start. The timing's too convenient. First the IRS, then this debt collection company. You're trying to destroy my marriage. Your marriage seems to be doing fine. Rachel was just here yesterday, showing me pictures of furniture for your new house." That stopped him cold. His face went pale, then flushed red, with something darker than anger. "You should have died with your wife?" He snarled, all pretense of civility abandoned. At least then Rachel would have inherited everything legally instead of me having to work for it. The mask had finally slipped. I leaned back in my chair, studying him with the detached interest of a scientist observing a specimen. "Interesting choice of words. Work for it? Is that what you call stealing $225,000 from my safe?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "I know about Eleanor Walsh." I continued conversationally. "Savannah, Georgia. $150,000 and 4 generations of family jewelry. I know about Patricia Williams in Charlotte. $200,000 plus her husband's war medals." Silas stumbled backward, hitting the wall. How do you... "I know about your laptop, Samuel. Or do you prefer Silas these days? The Mercer research folder was particularly thorough. 2 years of surveillance photos, my fishing schedule, detailed floor plans of this house." "You're in Zion," he whispered, but the fight had gone out of him. "You can't prove anything. The FBI disagrees. Agent Rebecca Thompson sends her regards, by the way. She's been looking for the connection between Eleanor and Patricia's cases. Imagine her delight when I provided the missing link. The front door opened, and Rachel's voice called out cheerfully, "Dad, I saw Silas's car in the driveway. Are you two having a nice chat?" She appeared in the doorway, still wearing her work scrubs, smile fading as she took in the scene. Silas pressed against the wall like a cornered rat, legal papers scattered across the floor, tension thick enough to cut. "What's going on?" Her eyes darted between us. "Silas, you look terrible." "Dad, why do you both look so serious?" Silas opened his mouth, but no words came out. The weight of his exposure had crushed whatever lies he might have prepared. "Silas, what is he talking about?" Rachel's voice rose with the first edge of panic. "Who are Eleanor Walsh and Patricia Williams? What other women?" For the first time since I'd known him, Silas Brooks, or Samuel or whatever his real name was, had absolutely nothing to say. The silence stretched like a wire ready to snap. Rachel stood in the doorway, staring at her husband with growing alarm. "I'm waiting for an answer, Silas. Who are Eleanor Walsh and Patricia Williams?" "Don't lie to me again." Silas straightened, scrambling for composure. "Baby, your father's trying to break us up with fake debts and—" "Show her," I said quietly, pulling out my phone with Brooks's photos. "Show her the laptop files." "Dad, what laptop files?" I scrolled to Silas's research folder. "From your husband's computer. Files created 2 years ago before you were engaged." Rachel's face went white as she saw surveillance photos of our house, my fishing schedule, detailed financial analysis. Her hands trembled, scrolling through images of her life, reduced to a criminal's research project. "This is our house, our kitchen." Her voice cracked. "Silas, why do you have pictures of Dad's study?" Eleanor Walsh was a widow in Savannah. I continued showing Brooks's case file. "Your husband, Samuel Brooks, then, courted her daughter, moved into Eleanor's home, then robbed her of $150,000 while she visited family." Rachel sank onto the couch, staring at Eleanor's photograph. "She looks like me." Patricia Williams in Charlotte. Same pattern. Samuel courted her daughter. Jennifer stole $200,000 plus war medals. "Stop," Rachel whispered. The daughters thought they'd found love. Instead, they'd been targeted by a predator who saw them as keys to their mother's money. Silas dropped beside the couch. "Rachel, yes, I made past mistakes, but I changed. I love you. Really love you. This isn't like those other times." "Other times?" Rachel shrieked. "How many families have you destroyed?" She turned to me, tears streaming. "Dad, those insurance papers for the house loan, were they real?" My heart broke for her. "What did they say, sweetheart?" "He said insurance forms, but I signed my name many times." Realization crumpled her face. "What did I sign?" "Loan applications. Debt instruments using your credit while he spent my stolen money." Rachel stood slowly looking at Silas like seeing him for the first time. "Mom's necklace? You said Dad gave it to you." "He did." "You stole it." Her voice went flat. "Stole it from Dad's safe, then made me an accessory." "Rachel, please." "The BMW. The house. Our entire life." She touched the necklace like it burned. "Everything's stolen." Silas reached for her hands, but she pulled away. "I love you. That was never fake." "Get out." Barely a whisper. "Baby, please." "Get out." She screamed with such force Silas stumbled backward. "Get out of this house. Get out of my life." He looked between us, perhaps calculating salvage options, but Rachel's face had hardened into something new. Not my trusting daughter, but a woman who'd learned misplaced faith's cost. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward the door. "Yes, it is," I replied, pulling out my phone. "Agent Rebecca Thompson will be here in an hour. Are you ready to testify?" Agent Rebecca Thompson arrived exactly 1 hour later, flanked by 2 Tampa PD detectives and carrying a briefcase thick with evidence files. 20 years of federal fraud investigation had given her the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every con game imaginable. "Mr. Mercer, Ms. Mercer," she nodded to us both, "I understand you're ready to make formal statements about Samuel Brooks, a.k.a. Silas Brooks." Rachel sat beside me on the couch, still wearing her work scrubs, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Agent Thompson, I need you to know, I had no idea what he was doing. I thought I was signing insurance papers, not loan documents." "We know, Ms. Mercer. You're a victim here, not a perpetrator. Your cooperation will help us build an airtight case." The next 3 hours were spent documenting everything: the laptop files, the surveillance photos, the timeline of thefts across 3 states. Rachel's voice shook as she described signing papers she'd never read, wearing jewelry she'd believed was a gift from her father. Brooks has been operating this scheme for at least 4 years, Thompson explained. Eleanor Walsh in Georgia, Patricia Williams in North Carolina, and now your family. Same pattern every time. Target a daughter, gain access to the mother's or father's assets, disappear with everything. 2 days later, they arrested Silas at a motel near the airport. He'd been trying to book a flight to Mexico using a fake passport. Apparently, he'd had an escape plan all along. The man Rachel had married, the man she'd trusted with her heart, had been ready to abandon her the moment his scheme unraveled. The federal courthouse in downtown Tampa was packed for the July trial. Eleanor Walsh's daughter flew in from Savannah, still devastated 18 months later. Patricia Williams's daughter Jennifer came from Charlotte, clutching photos of her father's stolen war medals. Rachel testified with quiet dignity, explaining how Silas had manipulated her into signing documents, how he'd isolated her from friends who might have asked uncomfortable questions. The prosecutor painted a picture of a serial predator who used love as a weapon. Silas's defense attorney tried to argue that his client had genuinely reformed, that his feelings for Rachel were real. But the laptop files destroyed that narrative. 2 years of premeditation, detailed financial planning, escape routes, mapped out from the beginning. Judge Harrison showed no mercy. Mr. Brooks, you have systematically destroyed families across multiple states. You've stolen not just money, but trust, security, and peace of mind. The court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison. The asset forfeiture hearing was swift. The BMW was seized and sold at auction for $42,000. The Hyde Park house, with its Spanish tiles and bay windows that had once represented Rachel's dreams, went for $380,000 after paying off the mortgage. I recovered $165,000 of my stolen money. Not everything, but enough to rebuild my retirement security. Eleanor Walsh's family received $60,000 and Patricia Williams got $75,000. It wasn't full restitution, but it was justice. The courtroom was silent as deputies led Silas away in handcuffs. He looked back once, his eyes finding Rachel in the gallery. She stared straight ahead, her face a mask of resolve I'd never seen before. Outside the courthouse, Rachel took my arm as we walked to my truck. Dad, I know this might sound strange, but could I move back home for a while? I need time to figure out who I am when I'm not being manipulated. I squeezed her hand. Sweetheart, that house has always been your home. February in Tampa brought the kind of gentle warmth that made you forget winter existed anywhere else. I sat on my back patio watching Rachel tend to the herb garden she'd planted in the corner of the yard. Basil, rosemary, thyme. Simple things that grew with patience and care. 6 months had passed since the trial, and my daughter was finally becoming herself again. Dad the Mint's taking over everything, she called out laughing as she wrestled with an overgrown plant. I think I need to transplant it before it conquers the whole garden. Some things need boundaries to thrive, I replied, and she shot me a knowing look. We'd had many conversations like this, gardening metaphors that carried deeper meanings about life, trust, and starting over. Rachel had thrown herself into rebuilding with the same intensity she'd once brought to planning her wedding. She'd found work at a nonprofit that helped fraud victims navigate financial recovery. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but she said it felt like turning her pain into purpose. I want to help people avoid what I went through, she'd explained during her job interview. I know what it feels like to have your entire reality built on lies. Tuesday evenings, we attended financial literacy workshops at the Tampa Community Center. Rachel took notes like a college student asking questions about credit monitoring, investment basics, recognizing romance scams. The other participants, mostly older adults who'd been targeted by various schemes, had embraced her like a daughter. Trust but verify had become her motto, borrowed from Ronald Reagan, but applied to everything from online dating profiles to apartment leases. She'd started a small savings account, insisting on complete financial independence, before she'd even consider another relationship. I need to know I can take care of myself, she'd said. I never want to be vulnerable like that again. Thursday nights were for cooking together, something we'd never done when she was married. Silas had always insisted on takeout, or restaurants claiming Rachel was too busy to cook. Now I realized he'd been isolating her from simple domestic pleasures that might have grounded her. You know what's funny? Rachel said one evening as we made Margaret's famous lasagna recipe. I used to think love meant never questioning anything your partner did. Mom never questioned you, and you two were so happy. Your mother questioned me plenty. I laughed. She just did it privately, and she trusted me because I'd earned it over 43 years. Trust is built through consistent actions, not blind faith. Trust is earned, not given. She repeated one of the lessons I'd been teaching her. Love doesn't mean being blind. The fraud prevention seminars we spoke at together had become surprisingly therapeutic. Rachel would tell her story. The gradual isolation, the papers she'd signed, without reading the red flags she'd ignored because she wanted to believe in fairy tale romance. I'd explain the financial investigation techniques that had exposed Silas's pattern. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is, Rachel would tell audiences of potential victims. And if someone pressures you to make quick financial decisions or keeps you away from family and friends, run. We'd gotten letters from people who'd recognized similar patterns in their own relationships and gotten out before it was too late. Eleanor Walsh's daughter had called to thank us for speaking at a Savannah Senior Center. Even Patricia Williams had written saying our story had helped her daughter Jennifer start dating again. As the sun set over Tampa Bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would make any postcard jealous, Rachel joined me on the patio with 2 glasses of sweet tea. "Dad, I need to tell you something," she said, settling into the chair beside mine. "I'm ready to get my own place again. Not because I don't love living here, but because I'm finally strong enough to be on my own." I smiled, watching a pelican dive for fish in the distance. "I think that's wonderful, sweetheart. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. Do you think you'll ever forgive me for not seeing what Silas really was?" I reached over and squeezed her hand. "There's nothing to forgive. You loved someone who didn't deserve it. That's not a character flaw. That's having a good heart in a world where some people exploit goodness." We sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. 2 people who'd learned that families can survive almost anything if they face it together, with honesty and love. Justice had taken time, but healing, that was happening every single day. Looking back on this true story, I realized that sometimes life teaches us the hardest lessons through the people we trust most. 6 months ago, I thought I'd lost everything. My money, my faith in family, and nearly my relationship with Rachel. But God works in mysterious ways, and what felt like destruction became the foundation for something stronger. The most painful true story is often the one that teaches us the most. I learned that love without wisdom is dangerous, and trust without verification is foolish. Rachel learned that independence isn't selfish. It's necessary. We both discovered that family bonds, when tested by fire and strengthened by honesty, become unbreakable. God gave me the patience to seek justice through legal means rather than revenge. He gave Rachel the courage to choose truth over comfortable lies, and He gave us both the grace to forgive, not just Silas but ourselves for the mistakes that made us vulnerable. This Grandpa Stories experience taught me that protecting your family sometimes means being willing to fight for them, even when they don't understand why. It's not enough to love your children. You must also equip them with wisdom to recognize those who would exploit that love. Grandpa Stories like mine happen more often than we'd like to admit. Romance scams, financial fraud, family betrayal. These aren't just headlines, they're real families being destroyed by predators who see kindness as weakness. But here's what I want you to remember from my Grandpa Stories. Evil may win battles, but God ensures it doesn't win the war. Justice may be slow, but it's certain. Families may bend under pressure, but they don't have to break. Rachel is thriving now, helping other fraud victims rebuild their lives. I've recovered most of my retirement savings. More importantly, we've recovered each other. True story endings don't always tie up perfectly, but they can still be beautiful. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling us what time it is where you are right now, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that prove love and justice can triumph over deception. Your support helps us reach families who need these lessons most.